the Gutterman Mammal podcast. And in this episode, I'm going to play you a few interviews I did with some blockchain people. This was Amanda Gutterman, the CMO, the Chief Marketing Officer at Consensys, the kind of commercial wing, shall we say, of Ethereum project. And then the next day, I spoke to Thomas Schouten, who is the head of marketing at Lisk, who are working on creating blockchain applications a little simpler. And I sort of specifically wanted to also talk to them about marketing something like blockchain. So we talk a little bit about their projects and their companies, but also dig into how you actually explain a concept like blockchain to people. Enjoy.
So I'm Amanda Gutterman. I'm Chief Marketing Officer at Consensys. My background was in more kind of pure digital media and marketing. I worked very closely with Arianna Huffington at the Huffington Post, helping run the contributor network and doing a bunch of different marketing projects for her. Then I got really excited about blockchain after Huffington Post. I started a digital media startup called Slant, and we had
Sounds familiar.
Good. We had a business model that was basically anyone can create a piece of content. Then we would optimize it for distribution with some automated and human techniques, and we would teach people content marketing, so help them get more reach for their content. And we had an audience that was largely college students and journalism school students, and we would serve ads across the whole thing, and then we would pay the people that wrote 70% of the advertising revenue that they brought in.
Is it still going? Or?
It isn't, unfortunately.
That's fairly forward-thinking.
But the exciting part was actually, I did a lot of thinking around what the internet did to digital media and to storytelling, and it democratized the ability to actually tell a story online and to send it to different people. It democratized access, but it didn't democratize value flows. No. So there weren't the value flows tied to the access. So I tried to tie those two back together with Slant. And during the time I was running Slant, I first learned about Ethereum. I knew about Bitcoin. I didn't get super into it because it seemed like just a currency system. Whereas with something like Ethereum, my mind was blown. I met some of the Consensys people early on before I worked there. They explained what it was to me, and my brain basically popped because I was imagining all the different types of business models that weren't reasonable or that weren't possible before that got unlocked by bringing payments down to near zero and being able to have n-sided transactions and divide an asset among a huge amount of beneficiaries and people participating. So obviously in media, the idea of micropayments is huge, and my business was a micropayment-based business. And also in other industries, thinking about things like remittances, thinking about all of the different business models that are unlocked by bringing transaction fees down to zero. And I knew that my next move would be into blockchain. So when I joined Consensys in 2016, we were still under 100 people. I was the first marketing hire, and
again, that's good. Although it's a shame they waited so long.
Well, we were really so Consensys was founded by Joseph Lubin, who was one of the co-founders of Ethereum, and actually Consensys began to exist officially before Ethereum was even launched.
Maybe actually just to fill in the gaps, because I've only really figured this out recently myself. What's the difference between the Ethereum Foundation and Consensys?
So the Ethereum Foundation, similar to the Linux Foundation or another like open source foundation, they're a not-for-profit. So that they're run by Vitalik Buterin and by Aya Miyaguchi, who's their executive director. Vitalik is their chief scientist, and their job is to act as a foundation and continue innovating, continue executing the roadmap technically of the Ethereum blockchain. Whereas Consensys was started by Joseph Lubin, who was one of the co-founders, and it is a for-profit company. So you can compare it to sort of what Red Hat is.
Linux Foundation and Red Hat. Yeah.
Right.
Although they're not so directly connected.
Precisely. And we have a great relationship with them. We've worked on a lot of projects together. We've been very collaborative with them over time, but we're a for-profit business.
Well, I've met Consensys.
So Consensys is a shortening of Consensys Systems.
Yeah.
CONSENSUS.
Okay, that helps.
Yeah, so that's the funny name. Consensys currently is one of the largest blockchain specialist companies. We have 850 people, and we're growing very quickly. We're in 28 countries right now. One big part of what we do, we have kind of 5 major prongs of activity, but one of them is Consensys Labs, which is our venture studio, which is incubating all kinds of different applications of blockchain technology, focusing on the Ethereum blockchain. For everything from journalism to music to fixed income reference data, just to identity, everything across the board. Basically, any vertical that you can imagine, supply chain, any vertical you can imagine that could be touched by blockchain, we're incubating an application in our studio to try and seize that opportunity. So we have 47 projects currently in the venture studio, and those run the gamut from early ideation stage to something that's about to be spun out. We've also spun out about 6 projects. One of them has a lot of personnel here in Berlin, which is Gnosis, our prediction markets platform.
Yeah, there's a lot of blockchain in Berlin, almost too much sometimes. But so these are the projects going to aim obviously to be monetized, I guess, in some way, and are they often aiming to be monetized in more conventional, in quote marks, ways, or also in the kind of blockchain model?
Yeah, so different projects have different business models that make sense depending on what they're doing. We recently announced a partnership with AWS and one of our spokes. That's what we call each of them. We call them spokes because we have a hub and spoke model. So we have a great project called Kaleido that's a SaaS business. That's software as a service blockchain. So obviously their business model is creating deals with different enterprises.
So you're creating
So that's one example of one with a more traditional model.
The Microsoft Cloud and the IBM Cloud have their own one, so it makes sense.
So that's one example. We also, another example with a very different business model is Truffle. So right now we give Truffle away for free. It's the most used Ethereum development framework.
I didn't actually realize it was a Consensys project.
It is.
It makes sense now.
Somewhere almost 99% of Ethereum projects are built on Truffle. It has over 500,000 downloads, and right now that is free. Eventually, sometime in the future, maybe it'll have a paid kind of prosumer model on top of it, but right now it's really about investing in the Ethereum community, so we don't feel a lot of pressure to monetize it right now. So the business model is really long-term. The business model is about allowing Ethereum to have as many at-bats as possible to create a great dApp, whether those come from within Consensys or outside. And it's the same for MetaMask, which is another one of our really popular. It's a Chrome browser plugin, has over 1 million users, also free. Also, potentially in the future, there are different ways to monetize it, but for now, we're focused on providing it for free in order to help grow the Ethereum ecosystem. So then there are examples like Ujo, which is putting out music on Ethereum, and you pay to access that music. So each of these business models works.
And I didn't realize any of them were part of Consensys.
Yes. Yes. So and Civil is a great project. It's a blockchain journalism project. It has its own business model where people can pay in tokens for journalism, basically creating two-sided markets.
Somewhat similar to Steemit? Or?
No, because what they're doing, instead of one giant platform and focusing on anybody being able to write, they're focusing on actually organizing professional journalists into newsrooms and creating sub-publications that are tokenized within this Civil umbrella. So almost functioning like a WordPress of Ethereum. So each of these businesses really has their own business model that's fit to function.
So what you've just done in the past few minutes is quite interesting, because I go to a lot of blockchain events and I write for fairly technical audiences, so I'm kind of used to sitting there and interpreting what people are trying to say. But the blockchain community is traditionally not very good at communicating. It has a tendency to be overcomplicated and have not much desire to reduce that complication. I think they like being overly complicated. And I've come across very few projects that are good at explaining themselves. So how do you do it? How do you figure out how to explain these projects to I guess, end users and business users without abstracting too much and dumbing them down. And,
sure. So different projects have different audiences, and some of our tools have an extremely technical developer audience, and we need to make sure we're giving them all the information they need. So I actually run something within Consensys called Consensys Catalyst, which is a blockchain marketing agency that works with all of our internal projects, but also with external projects. And the advice that I give, especially for consumer-facing dApps, is don't get hung up by the idea that you need to explain the blockchain to everyone. Explain your value add, explain your proposition to the user, and explain what the blockchain does for that, how it supports that mission. But if there are people creating dApps saying no one's using my dApp because they don't understand the blockchain, that's a poor excuse because they don't need to understand the blockchain. Understanding how the internet works isn't a prerequisite to using the internet.
Sometimes
understanding how a light works isn't a prerequisite to turning on the light switch.
But I guess just drilling into that, the internet is better developed than it was in the past. Electricity mostly works most of the time. Blockchain is still fairly nascent and early days, and sometimes, for example, public key is a fundamental of blockchain, but still not that accessible. So do you ever come into a sort of conflict with, you would like the product founders or yourself to push on one angle, but there's still something that sort of spoils that slightly from a technical perspective?
Yeah, I think the blockchain community has a lot to do in terms of UX. And I think building really great UX and accessibility is going to be a huge part.
There's actually a very good talk about this very subject at a blockchain event here a couple of months ago.
It's going to be a huge key to adoption. But the flip side is to remember that we're still really early, and that a lot of that is coming, and we need to build a lot of our most popular products are developer tools because we're still building the roads. And before you can build, the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world in Dubai, before you build the Burj Khalifa, you have to build the roads. And we are seeing other types of projects being adopted that aren't just that very lowest layer. But for now, we're building the roads. I often get the question, what year are we in? Comparing this to the internet in terms of adoption. And what's been crazy about this is that it's moving so much faster. So it's hard to even say that we're, in 1989 or when we're in 1992 or 1996 because the actual curve is going crazy.
It's interesting something you said earlier just sparked to my mind, and then you kind of led into it of saying it's still early days. But you think that, Bitcoin is 10 years and the concepts behind Bitcoin are a little older than that. It's actually not so early days anymore. Actually, an interesting question would be, when do you think we could stop using that as an excuse?
So the Bitcoin blockchain is about 10 years old. Ethereum is still a baby blockchain.
Sure.
It's still only a couple years old, and there's a vast difference between what it does and what the Bitcoin blockchain does.
Yeah, fair enough.
And there's a very aggressive security and scalability roadmap that's been enacted fairly regularly by the foundation and by all the people coming together to support it. The Ethereum blockchain works. It handles more transactions than all other blockchains combined. 94 out of the top 100 blockchain projects are currently built on Ethereum and has the largest developer community by 30x. It's 30 times the size of the next largest blockchain developer community, which is Hyperledger Fabric.
Which is also a reason.
So it works. It's used, and we can see that there's a lot of enthusiasm for it from the fact that all these developers are working on it. So even if, whether you think tokenization is the killer consumer app, which I think there's an argument for, or whether you think that's still down the road, there are a huge amount of at-bats, and that's why we're so excited about encouraging developers.
I'm gonna be a bit British, and you're quite American.
Am I?
In the way that you answer questions, and I'm a bit British, so you've spoken a lot about some of the positives of your work, but
are the British more negative? Is that what's going on?
Positive. I don't know.
That's
negative,
fine.
Less positive.
I'm all for it.
I've been to a lot of American conferences recently, and sometimes I just stand there like, I just need something else to stop with the positive.
Let's get sarcastic.
Sure. No. Well, it's like with with marketing, especially around developer projects. I've worked around this field myself quite a lot, developer tools. developers tend to be quite skeptical people. Ethereum is new. Ethereum's had its problems.
It's true.
So how do you work with that side of the marketing, the buffeting against the negative press and speech and the community as well?
Yeah, by being extremely factually accurate. And that is the only answer, because blockchain marketing in general, and especially facing developers, shouldn't be about creating hype and telling stories. It should be about connecting people to tools that they want to use. Period, exclamation point. Developers speak with their choice of technology. That's how they vote. We've been seeing how they've been voting, and that's been coming out really well for Ethereum. There are a lot of blockchain projects that are all about storytelling, all about hype, that don't even have any technology out, and that aren't even useful. Ethereum launched with its own token, right? So the Ethereum platform was live, and it launched on itself. And there are a lot of blockchain platforms and blockchain projects that can't say that for themselves, that mostly survive on a white paper and that survive on storytelling hype. And so being factually accurate, backing up everything you say with the actual technology, and focusing on connecting people with tools is the way to get around that. You're not gonna fool them. You're not gonna you're not gonna have some non-technical marketing person who fools people into using a product that doesn't actually work. The focus should be on connecting them with something that's useful to them.
It's very easy to criticize when you've done nothing. I mean, with Ethereum, it's made mistakes, but at least it had something to then build upon.
Yeah,
change and learn.
And certainly there are mistakes. The DAO was a very hastily created project built on top of Ethereum, and obviously there were problems with that very early on in the Ethereum life story, and we hear about that all the time still, even though that was fixed.
I'm not even particularly bothered about picking. I was just thinking more broadly.
No, but it's good, because all of these
get it out in the open.
Totally. I mean, all of these different issues can really strengthen a blockchain platform if they're handled well. And that's why a lot of blockchain projects put out bug bounties, so they can learn from the community how to make their platforms more secure.
Nature should be reasonably open anyway.
And we haven't seen anything else like that since then.
Actually, I wanted to ask a different question, but just a very quick tangent. Are all your current projects open source, or will some be closed source?
A huge proportion of them are open source. A few of them aren't for certain different kinds of IP reasons. We endeavor to keep everything as open source as possible.
So actually, a little bit more about you. I mean, you've already said, and I understand this very well myself, about that technical marketing to developers, when you don't understand what you're talking about, is a bad idea. You definitely come from the world of understanding what the tools can solve, but you didn't mention any technical background. So how did you learn?
Yeah, so I do actually have a slight technical background. I was roommates in college with the guys that were starting Code Academy.
All right.
And though I did not take computer science as an undergraduate, they were testing out their tools on dummies like me that were studying things like English and statistics. No, it's fine. I'm being British now. So I learned how to code on a few different tools using some of those services, and got kind of, I wouldn't call myself a coder, but I understand on a fundamental level kind of what that framework is. And then I would say that there are so many concepts in blockchain that are very technical that it can be very daunting for someone who comes from not studying computer science, not studying being a developer. But I think that actually shouldn't be off-putting to people. I think that you can pick it up very quickly, especially since it's just a couple years old. It'll be much harder 10, 15 years down the road when there's more of a canon and there's more that you have to learn to actually get up to speed. But I would say someone who's interested, even if they come from a non-technical background and wants to start learning some of the technical stuff and is open to that, now is a great time to get on board, because it hasn't been around enough years to really build up that much stuff.
The only downside of it changes the whole time is sometimes you learn something and then 6 months later that's gone.
That's true. But this is why I recommend to a lot of women that they, whether they're technical, whether they're not, to go into blockchain, because it's so new that there's no pre-existing hierarchy. There's no super long canon, so you can become an expert, quote unquote, fairly quickly.
the blockchain community, I would say, is a mixed blessing because it's a very... It can, in terms of what you just said, it can sometimes be a little less welcoming than some of the other newer technical communities. But actually, what the point you said is an interesting one. I have been, for example, chatbots, for example, and voice interfaces. Again, okay, some of the concepts are not new, but there's the combination of various technologies are quite new, and equally, both those scenes are more diverse because they're new, and there's less bullshit legacy to battle against. And blockchain, especially in Berlin, is somewhat similar. As I say, I don't think the community is always that welcoming, but the diversity tends to be higher, again, because there's less legacy to battle against. It's an interesting point, actually, though.
I think the blockchain is finance plus engineering, and the seeder communities for who go into blockchain are both very heavily male dominated. So if you're seeding the community with finance and with engineering, then it's going to end up looking like that. But we've been making a huge effort to open it up to more people. Consensys plays host to women in blockchain, which is becoming a really large group in New York and in a bunch of other cities. Also, I started an event series called Ethereum, which is one of the largest blockchain event series. This past year, we had 60% women speakers.
Oh, really?
We didn't make a big fuss of it. We didn't put out some press release saying 60% women.
Thing to do sometimes.
But there are extremely high quality projects that are being led by women.
And there's a reason around here. Sometimes it's hard to keep up with what people are doing in Berlin.
Yeah,
Things can't go very quickly.
So there are two other women who are really wonderful on the blockchain stage today. Galia Benartzi, who's one of the co-founders of Bancor, and also Jess from Codex. Codex is an art on the blockchain provenance platform that we actually partnered with at Ethereal to run a charity art auction, at which a crypto kitty sold for a record-breaking $140,000 for charity. But it was a very exciting time, and what they're doing is really interesting.
Yeah, the Bancor Codex I think came across my list, but there's actually a fairly old, in quote marks, in terms of blockchain space anyway, company here who are somewhat given up on that idea now, called Ascribe. You might have met Trent and Bruce through other things.
Yeah, I've heard of them.
Yeah.
I'm not super familiar.
Their office used to be on my street. So just very quick about Consensys itself. So the main office is New York, or?
So we're a decentralized company. So we do have the largest concentration at our office in Bushwick, which is a pretty unusual place to have an office. It's in New York. It's in Brooklyn, but it's in a very Bushwick. Bushwick.
Because I'm also Australian, and Bushwick sounds like an Australian.
Yes. So it's in Bushwick. It's an area that's very artsy, very up and coming. A lot of graffiti. It's not where you would expect a traditional company to have an office. We're a very non-traditional company. We have an office in San Francisco. We have a growing presence in LA. We have a great office in Toronto. We also have a presence in Dubai. We have an office there. We're the official blockchain advisor to the city of Dubai, helping them be the first city to run on a blockchain by 2020. We have Singapore. We have a growing presence in both Australia and New Zealand. We have an office in Paris. We have a pretty big office in London. Now one in Dublin. We also have one in Bucharest.
So you joined at 100 people.
I joined at just under 100 people. Right now it's 850 going on 1,000.
And is that all? Is that currently funded from the Ether tokens, or is it VC funding or sales or a bit of everything?
So we've never taken external funding, so we don't have any VCs or angels or anyone external. Our company has a few different lines of business for generating revenue. So we do a huge amount of consulting work. It's called Consensys Solutions. It's our group that works with enterprises and governments. And then in Consensys Labs, the venture studio, a lot of projects, as they graduate from that, do so with a token launch.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. And just to wrap up, in the next 6 months, what's on the roadmap? What's the plans or anything you want to make sure people know is happening in the next 6 months?
Sure.
6 months is an arbitrary number if you want to go.
Well, I think we're seeing a huge amount of adoption. I think we're going to see some more government adoption, hopefully some more good news out of the SEC.
Yeah.
There was some really exciting news about Bitcoin and Ether not being a security recently, and I think we're really excited to get more clarity.
Yeah. Most governments around the world are being moderately progressive about it.
I think we're excited to get clarity. We have a great project that's really starting to flourish called the Brooklyn Project, which brings together a big group of industry stakeholders with regulators and lawyers to define responsible frameworks for the token industry, and that's been really taking off. We're seeing a massive influx of developers onto the tools that we're building and our platforms. Civil is launching, which is really exciting. So the journalism project that I was discussing, I think we're just going to see more and more adoption, and I think Consensys is going to see some pretty radical growth. Consensys is interesting because we're making this effort at a flat, non-hierarchical, decentralized structure for ourselves, and I think we're one of the first companies, there are a few others, to be able to actually operate at scale with that kind of system.
There are famous examples, but they're not that big, like Basecamp, 37 Signals, but they're not that.
Yeah, so I think as we continue to scale, we're going to have to refine that decentralized model more and more.
Yeah.
And the funny thing you realize is that you need more process, not less. In order to have more autonomy, you actually need a lot more process.
It's somewhat depressing when you realize
So
that.
we're building that. It's an amazing spaceship. There are some parts of it that we're building while we're flying it, but I strongly while we're paving the roads, I strongly suspect that we might have very many more people on that spaceship in a short amount of time.
Well, so I'm Thomas Schouten. I'm Dutch. Was the first non-developer on the team actually, approximately 1.5 years ago. And since then, being very much focused on expanding the marketing team itself in the beginning, while doing the marketing on the side. And at the moment, I think we're about to hire our 15th, so 15 people in the marketing and communications department.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah.
And the whole company is the Lisk headquarters is now 45 to 50 people, so we're hiring like 4-6 per month. And with those people, we're trying to build the most accessible blockchain platform out there. So, in a nutshell, we're trying to build a framework in JavaScript, utilizing Node.js in order for JavaScript developers to deploy their own sidechain. It's kind of like our unique selling point. Although the sidechain topic gets very much popular across the last, half a year. We saw it also in Consensys in 2018, a few weeks ago. That is a hot topic. But we were one of the first actually to publicly use this as a selling point in our ICO, which was approximately 2 years ago, and raised 14,000 Bitcoins. And with that money, we have been building on our platform. That moment it was worth approximately $6 million, and now it's $120 million. So we had a lot of more funding.
And probably
since the beginning,
like 100 million.
Yes, you're completely right. I haven't checked it, but I heard some screams in the company.
I hope you cashed out some of it.
This is all being taken care of by the board in Zug in Switzerland, where we're headquartered, and by our legal and financial advisors in Zug.
As much as you're happy to go into, what's kind of your definition and implementation of a sidechain?
Okay, so what I as an example use is like sidechains comes with like 3 advantages basically. So the first one, we look obviously at other platforms, including Ethereum, which has the first mover advantage and still has. It's vastly more developed on than any other platform. We've been around for a while, and I've been looking at it as well and trying to solve those mistakes before we offer our SDK or our sidechain development kit to developers. So the first one is it's it's more scalable. It's not really solving the scalability issues as you see with Ethereum. It's more that you scatter out all the traffic over different chains, which means that, instead of having everything on the main chain, with Lisk you have different side chains. Also, of course, those side chains also needs to be, governed and be secured by other delegates in our case, because we are running on a DPoS consensus algorithm. So it's more scalable, or at least it postpones the scalability issues. It's more secure. What you saw, for example, with Parity or with DAO, etc. If something goes wrong with a smart contract, it's sometimes irreversible. And if something goes wrong on the side chain, it doesn't affect another side chain or the main chain, which is another one. And the third one is it's especially in the future more custom. So if you say, okay, my application, my decentralized or blockchain application, doesn't really fit with proof of work, then in the case of Ethereum, that's a problem. And in the case of Lisk, in the beginning, people will copy our consensus algorithm because they will basically make a copy of our main chain as their white label side chain. But eventually they can swap out that module for something else. So if they say, well, actually, my application is better fitting proof of work or proof of stake, in contrast to the delegated proof of stake, they can do this either by modules provided by Lightcurve, which is a development studio here in Berlin, or developed by themselves. So it's like kind of a little bit like how we see that side chains can benefit. And our science team is currently consists of 3 people, and we're having that's like the core science team. Obviously, we have like scientific backend developers, and the main thing is right now is improving, optimizing the two-way pack between the sidechain and the main chain. So how do we guarantee that, the tokens that, for example, are being locked away on the main chain and being opened up on the sidechain, how does this pegging works 2 ways? How can we, strengthen and emphasize interoperability between those sidechains, etc., etc. And this requires significant research. And I know that other, Cardano is another blockchain platform which is very much focusing on research, scientific research before they go to implementation. And I think that we are shifting a little bit more towards a scientific and theoretical moment. We're having improvement proposals internally where we discuss the scientific proposals. Some are more basic level in terms of, okay, what will be the dynamic fees for Lisk, for example, which is now currently also being worked on, but then also the more advanced topics of this two-way pack. So yeah, a lot is happening at the moment at the headquarters.
So just to dig into a couple of those things, when you say side chain to the main chain, is it just to your own main chain, or can you side chain to other blockchains?
Initially, our main chain. Sometimes people argue, okay, that's going to be an enclosed ecosystem. That's a bit against the spirit of openness.
Well, there are a lot of private blockchains, of course, which little bits of what you said made it sound slightly like that, but
no, we definitely like our own blockchain. We don't want to exclude like private or permission chains, but the focus will be initially in public and permissionless blockchains or side chains. And this by itself, if we can get this straight or right, it's an amazing thing to have for millions of developers. So the future is bright in that regard. Let's first fix this, and then we're going to start talking about interoperability between different main chains. And there's other projects working on exactly that as well on the side, right? Which we can also cooperate with or again learn from. So first things first. I think it's very complicated what we're doing to begin with. So let's get this first out.
And actually, talking about the JavaScript level, what is that? What does that look like? What are you trying to add on? Okay, I think because to me, one of the aspects that I've often found confusing, and I think a lot of developers get confused with blockchain development, is you have the blockchain that, like Bitcoin, for example, had this sort of loose opcode way of developing on Bitcoin. Ethereum has smart contracts, but you're always sort of like, then what? Then what do I do? So there's the fact that you're adding on a JavaScript layer immediately, which is a language a lot of people are familiar with, kind of opens it up a lot more.
Yeah.
So what does or what will that experience look like for JavaScript developers even?
Yeah. So our main slogan is like enabling blockchain creators, right? And then in the kind of the secondary slogan is like making it as accessible and simple as possible. So it really is that easy that if you go to the documentation of Lisk, which is lisk.io/documentation, We are currently actually about to release an updated version of that specific documentation, which is vastly improved and much more professional than the current state of it. It's any JavaScript developer, and literally, if you are a good developer, and I say it conservative, but within 30 minutes, you have your full node up and running, and you're part of the network of Lisk. And that's just like the first step towards your sidechain, basically, or towards to be a delegate, or if you're holding a lot of tokens in your wallet, you want to have a full node yourself rather than just using the client. So it's that easy. And so it's not only like the code itself, which is then in JavaScript, but it's also, again, the documentation, which is about to be released. It's just a few days ahead of us, in preparation of the Core 1.0 release, which we are heading testnet in exactly a week. Which is great news today, went out this morning. But it's also like the Lisk Academy, for example. So Lisk Academy has like the blockchain business and blockchain basics part. Okay, that's nice for education and inspiration. But then the third part we are developing internally with the help of content creators and developers, which is blockchain builders. And there you have like the whole, almost like we're working with the design agency to make it like gamification, very, very much like in a fun way. How do I go from an idea to a sidechain, right? And also, what is the difference between a smart contract, and what we are doing? Because we are often, quoted as like a smart contract platform, but in a way we don't support smart contracts. And how is this different? This will all be, explained in this blockchain builders part within the academy. And in our world, ideally, we would just get a random JavaScript developer from the street, put him in front of that part of the academy, let him read through the academy, then he can go to the documentation, and without any further explanation, he should be able to deploy his own sidechain. And that's pretty cool, because the guy or girl can have his own blockchain within a day, maybe even.
So what do you replace the smart contract concept with? Is it back to actually somewhat more traditional programming, really?
Actually, I have difficulties explaining that. Yeah. For that, you should talk to the science team in how they replace that specific application of smart contracts. Sometimes we get questions in terms of like if the smart contract will be replaced or will be supported eventually. Yes, but again, we should really focus on the first thing, getting that two-way back right between the main chain and the side chain, and then we're going to start, customizing and adding other features, Ethereum, virtual machine, etc., etc. Possibilities are endless.
Okay, a question that you're probably more comfortable with then. All that said, like as a developer who is new to blockchain or not, what might I want to use Lisk for? What do you consider the kind of good use cases?
Yeah, this is a very good topic, because we believe that if Lisk or blockchain in general actually should, how does it become like successful and widely adopted? We look a little bit to AI. In the case of AI, it's very much a little bit ahead of the adoption curve. Not so much, but still there's a little bit more real use cases than in contrast to blockchain, which is surprising to me a little bit. And how does AI work? AI works in the sense that there's a very specific use case which is being optimized by artificial intelligence, right? And this is such a good thing you can show to the world, to other people, to skeptical people, etc. We should do the same with blockchain. So it's a very good question. Where is Lisk good at doing? And this is something we are defining actually at the moment for ourselves. For example, EOS has like the slogan "decentralize everything." Well, that's very nice, and we also want to target everybody. But let's again go back to the beginning, because the ambition is there. But
yeah, they haven't had such good press recently.
No, okay, that's true. That's true. But every blockchain has their pros and cons. And let's see next week how we migrate to testnet. I have very good hopes. The guys are running like over hours and testing like crazy. But back to what we were talking about, like those specific use cases, we need to define this both on our end, and the developer needs to show us, basically. Like I think that you saw with the internet, and you will see it with the Lisk blockchain and other blockchain platforms, the best or the first killer app or the best applications are to be determined by clever developing entrepreneurs or businesses, right? And we will support that. And I think that if we see that the specific use cases are being used more often, applications than others, we will focus on that and maybe add modules that support those use cases.
And by AI, do you mean that aspect that seems to be quite a good use case in the blockchain space of the sort of machine to machine, almost payment with devices is the one that's often mentioned with AI and blockchain, like the ability for the post sorting machine to contact a drone that takes the parcel, that then opens the boot of your car and drops the parcel in and shuts it in. That kind of.
And all the data is being stored on the blockchain, you mean?
Yeah, that kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah, but you get a merge of almost IoT, AI, and blockchain. And again, then we should go back to what we were doing first. Like, let's first be able to deploy sidechains, and then we can, how can we link this? We're talking to, exploring this topic with AI of IoT and also AI experts and also companies here in Berlin. But it's more on a fun level to kind of where we can take this, basically. To be honest with you, this doesn't really impact the way our day-to-day development sprints are being conducted. It's more like, what is possible, and it's just cool because we're so, it's our hobby as well, besides that we're working hard on it.
It comes down to what is your job, explaining it to people, and just because something is general purpose doesn't mean you can't just focus on targeting a particular set of developers in industry first.
Yeah, I mean, so what actually is some sort of guidance where we can take the applications is that our consensus algorithm is based on voting.
Okay.
So it's like delegated proof of stake. So the whole game theory and the political aspects of it and the psychology that comes with voting and devoting people and, people teaming up together, etc. What happens also in normal political situations, it's kind of mimicked, but then on the blockchain, right? And there's a huge reward that comes with it. And no, we try to avoid it, but it's even EOS has it right now, right? There's pros and cons of the people they are being elected, recently. And I think if we can get this, there's no consensus algorithm waterproof or perfect yet. There's again pros and cons for every consensus algorithm. But if we can get this right, we really want to stick with DPoS, but definitely reshape it and adjust it. Then this voting component is of course a very interesting element, which we can lead the way at in terms of an application voting.
One more sort of not really a technical question, but it's a product question. I actually want to ask you a little bit more specifically about your job.
Yeah.
Have you looked at Hyperledger Compose?
I heard, yes.
And basically I wondered how that compares to what you're trying to work on. I interviewed the lead of Hyperledger as well, and he also admitted that it's not quite there yet, but this aspect of trying to make developing blockchain applications, well, in their case, it's actually just online, pasting the JavaScript, and it gives you the modeling language, and I think they're aiming it much more at kind of business analyst type people.
Yeah.
The ones who are used to write Excel macros and things like that. But this aspect of the visual builder.
Well, okay, so I have to be careful what I say because first of all, I'm not informed into the project that well. Of course, I've seen passed it by multiple times. Actually, I've heard good stories about it as well. It's also being used by more companies, especially companies, than individuals, than at the moment Lisk. Yeah. So in that regard, it's a little bit different. I have the feeling exactly how you describe it, that's the case. And, I'm not 100% sure about it, but I think this Hyperledger is targeting this niche, and on the same time, kind of is part of this bigger experiment where we are trying to do. Okay, well, how does blockchain implement business? So and we can look at that. We can maybe and hopefully convince people to deploy their full swing sidechain eventually when they tested it out first with other platforms or Hyperledger. Future will tell. There's room for multiple applications, and they will have their own strengths and weaknesses.
I think sometimes it frustrates me that there's so many options because I kind of want people to collaborate more. But if we want to continue making that somewhat dated now comparison to, the blockchain is like the internet of the 90s. Yeah. A lot of people had some crazy ideas, and then a lot of them fell. And then eventually we kind of got to what we have now, which is why blockchain came along to change what we have now. Well, it didn't quite work out how we hoped. But anyway, that's kind of a whole other conversation. Yeah. But a few people have explained this to me. I've worked in the open source community for a long time, and I'm always kind of more of one of these people that so you're doing this and you're doing this and they're quite similar. Why don't you work together? It's we don't want to.
Yeah.
And I know sometimes you need a bit of both. But
we actually I think I was discussing this with Max, right, the CEO and co-founder, and he said that I think we see a little bit of a change where everybody's a little in the beginning of this hype, especially with a very bullish market, very a bit cocky in a sense that say like we can do it ourselves. Whereas now you see that projects that have similar, threats or similar difficulties of getting it actually to the real use cases and the real world. It's like, why don't we just team up? Either with knowledge sharing, etc.
Things like that as well.
We were in Consensys in New York during the blockchain week, and also Icon was there, from Korea, and we were talking with them. It was a very pleasant conversation, and sharing knowledge and experience, and also just having fun. And it turned out they are so similar to us. They are also in the co-working space, which is called WeWork. Okay, they're across the other side of the planet and they speak a different language, but what they're trying to achieve, their team structure, the size, everything, it's pretty similar. And then we said, okay, we definitely need to do more with that and other projects. So
on the subject, you kind of gave me a perfect segue on the subject of sort of the community changing and Consensys. I interviewed the CMO of Consensys as well earlier in the week. And it's interesting because I asked her the same question. You already said you currently have like 12 people in the marketing department?
Yeah, something. Yeah, well, depending, like next week there's new people joining. Yeah.
And, in my mind, traditionally, certain aspects of the blockchain space were fairly bad at explaining what they did. I think a lot of it came from the origins of it. It was a very technical solution to problems. It was very mathematical. It generally came from engineers who just sort of saw a beautiful solution to a problem but weren't very good at explaining why it was a beautiful solution. And I notice now that these companies are finally taking on technical writers, marketing people, DevRel people who are actually good at explaining why it's useful to the same audience. But and so I'd be interested to hear what was the impetus in the company to, I guess, first hire you, but then hire so many people? Even in more traditional tech companies, you probably wouldn't have that many staff. So
well, actually, that's I can explain that because I just thought about it because yesterday I gave a presentation, or 2 days ago I gave a presentation at TOA, a keynote on the innovation stage, where I talked about the differences between blockchain marketing and traditional startup marketing, and there's a few big differences. And in a traditional startup, you have to show traction before you get funding. And then with that traction comes customers. And of course, you maybe have like a handful of VCs, if you're lucky as a startup, that put pressure. In our case, you get all the funding and the whole community with all skin in the game since the beginning. There's no office manager, there's no HR in place, there's no marketing, there's no best practices either, because doing marketing for blockchain is completely different than for traditional startup. So we have to figure out everything ourselves from scratch while we are building the team.
With the pressure of a lot of money.
And with all the pressure of all the people, and our ICO price was 7 cents. It went all the way to around $40, which is amazing. And now it's back to way less. But these swings affect the mood of people, like the kind of controlling the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, denial, like people hiding behind their username on the internet and making either spread fake news or pumping something up, which is not that it's not a partnership. We're just discussing something with this company. So there's a lot to correct, and I could literally use 50 people in my department, literally. We can have community managers for every country. We can have somebody that translates all the content. We can make 100 times more events. So, I'm sure if you walk through the streets of Berlin here and you ask people, do you know Lisk? I would doubt how many people would know Lisk. And I think that there's so much to gain still that 11 people, and that's not like 11 online marketeers. It's like 11 people, or 12 now, which is like, me leading and overseeing the team, community managing, even design. So the whole redesign we did, all the videos, all the over 50 infographics for the academy, it's all being produced in-house. All our media placements, PR, today's interview, it's all being, obviously we have contractors like Waxman and other contractors in the industry, but the vast majority of the things we're doing, it's just being done by those 11, 12, and soon a little bit more people. And we are heading towards this core 1.0 mainnet, and then we are a little bit you can really see that our platform gets more shape, and that requires also the hiring of tech evangelists. And on the same side, business developers.
Exactly. It's a conventional path for the more conventional tech business. I actually do some of that sort of work on the side of journalism, because tech journalism is great fun but doesn't pay very well. I actually noticed it myself kind of a few years ago with a lot of European, more conventional European tech companies. They started hiring tech writers and DevRel people because they got to that point where they looked at America and was like, what are they doing differently and what are we missing? Oh, we need those people, not just engineers and like business people, but actually like the people in between who can translate between them.
Yeah, and you know, further down the line, it only becomes more important.
Exactly. It's something that I was actually thinking the same thing that you said in your talk about this aspect that you do have to do everything out in the open. You have all the pressure up front. And some people just run away and hide. Yeah. Or run away and, you know, negative, whether
get affected by it.
They intend to do that or not. It's another conversation. And you're also, you know, you've often sat down and said you're going to solve a very complicated problem that even a conventional startup would have taken probably years to solve. But they started with 100K and not.
It makes life easier, right? So it's like kind of like the bootstrapping component in our industry is not really the case. There's only a few projects which are bootstrapped. The majority is being financed by ICOs. Yeah. But that's then the only positive thing we have compared to, you know, there's a huge pressure both on time and to deliver. And you see it happening with projects that they, because of this pressure and because they want to keep the price up and everybody happy, they go too soon to mainnet or they don't provide proper documentation. And it's a lot of things.
The moment in the sun,
And it's a little bit for the discussion we have as well, and I can freely talk about that. It's for us also a little bit a trade-off between, you know, having steady momentum as like one of the first projects to focus on sidechains, whereas it gets more popular, but not rushing it because there's a few hundreds of millions in the network, and our CTO is always emphasizing on tests and stability. And if you see how long, 1.0 took way too long. We made some architectural decisions, wrong decisions, and we're fixing that with new talent in the team, etc. And we are on a very good track. And I mean, how we have, although it's like a rat race kind of, it's still a long-term game, and we rather have, you know, the image of being a very sturdy and professional both organization and platform, so businesses then later can make the decision further down the line, okay, we're going to choose for Lisk because this and this reason.
In fact, in some respects with ICOs, the better model to look at is something like Kickstarter, not VC funding. You know, it's the same kind of model. You have an idea, and then you get a lot of money, and then a lot of people sit there going, when's it ready?
It's crazy. It gets crazy off. And there's also a lot of things, and I also really want to emphasize this. There's so much happening which doesn't end up on Twitter. I mean, the whole legal and financial structure we have with the foundation in Switzerland, working together with MME and other parties over there, we get praised for how professional we have things being designed over there with a limited liability company in Berlin, and this structure is being copied by many other platforms, including companies in Berlin, but also even Icon and other people that are based officially in Zug in Switzerland. But it's very important, and you know, and there's a lot of young people involved, and there's also a lot of people that are maybe in this field, especially in that financial field or legal field, not so much experience. And then not only money is the thing that helps you out. Not always.
Exactly. All right. Final question then. I say I was at your first birthday party. How long ago was that? 4 or 5 months?
So it was not really a birthday party. It was more. Our birthday is on the 24th of May.
So
our birthday was actually recently. But the party was. You were there actually.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. It was a relaunch event. So that's kind of like So what we said is like it was a rebranding combined with a new product, which is the Lisk Hub.
4 or 5 months ago.
It was the 20th of February. Okay. So yeah, exactly.
Pretty close then.
Yeah, exactly.
So obviously blockchain space and blockchain companies move very quickly. You've already mentioned a few things, but what's the kind of major announcements you want to make sure people know that you have planned over the next 6 months?
Yes, okay. Well, if we go back to February, it was like clearly like, okay, finally going to a really like just a template website, a WordPress website. Almost was not, but it looked like that. And a small growing team which has to figure it out themselves to a clear defined brand strategy, a goal, what we want to envision. and then also a professional event around it, which in my opinion was one of the most professional events organized by a cryptocurrency. And of course we look a little bit onto the side how Apple and others are doing it. So there was like a real marketing.
It was a very slick event.
It was
I never really did a write-up because I wanted sort of to wait, but the one thing I will almost remind myself in this interview, because it was actually quite remarkable how professional that event was. And I go to a lot of events in Berlin. A lot of events in Berlin are very amateur. And there was actually possibly the biggest thing I got out of it was very professional. So
yeah, what's the word we saw? Yeah, thanks. What's the word we saw most also on the YouTube comments and on Reddit was like professional, and that was a big compliment for us. And why? Because we preach to have like this professional setup, and that we are very serious, and that we're not popping champagne bottles every second week. Never actually, because this image is also a little bit sticky to like the amount of money that flows into this industry. But we have like professional like appearance.
You've all got Ferraris. That's it.
Definitely not. I don't have a car, and I don't want to keep it like that.
I'm just joking.
No, because it's Berlin, so you can do everything by bike. I'm Dutch after all.
Yeah,
but yeah, so that's like really like branding, setting the things, and showing that the marketing department is capable of organizing such an event. Yeah. Again, focusing on professionalism. Now the talking needs to be done by development. I think that in the whole industry, like marketing is kind of sometimes leading the way with like moon to the moon, Lambo giveaways, etc., airdrops. But in the end, the development is what counts, right? So now it's up to development. We predicted when 1.0 would hit mainnet. Well, this has been delayed for good reasons. For the reasons I just mentioned, focusing on security, stability. So today we announced testnet. So in 1 week we go to testnet. 2 to 4 weeks. I assume, I predict it's going to be mainnet. I think we're steady enough to go there, and that's like the first foundation for the blockchain platform. What comes after that is reducing the fees. So we go from static fees, 0.1 per transaction, which is pretty significant with the current price, to dynamic fees, which is like a magnitude lower, which also opens up our network for many more people. Imagine that we did some analysis. There's so many people that have a few tokens, and just as a little bit invested in cryptocurrencies and have a few Lisk tokens. Yeah, if they have to send one Lisk token and 10% of that is gone to fees, that's not really accessible, right? So first, like dynamic fees, which is very important, also for the voting on delegates, to get a little bit more liquidity in that as well. New address system, that's a milestone. That address system is sidechain proof with a higher entropy, etc. Also announced during the relaunch events being worked on at the moment by our science team and backend team. We want to tweak the consensus algorithm, which is a hot topic and a sensitive topic because it involves a lot of parties and a lot of money and that is involved. We're doing research regarding that because at the moment we're doing very thorough feasibility studies for all those different milestones on the backend side. So like our core Elements and Commander. The Elements is the JavaScript library, and Commander is our command line interface. And those three together, and those two together with Core, form our backend products. And I'm not sure when it will be released, but we're gonna have a very thorough, planned out roadmap from status quo to SDK and everything in between, and also with the prioritization. So what do we prefer to do first? Because we still have limited resources. We are hiring like crazy, but you have only this amount of developers at the moment.
And managing these stuff.
And managing as well. And then you have like their state of the art. There's developing. There's one third state of the art, and then the other third is actually testing. And it's always being underestimated how long testing and making things waterproof are. And so that's like in a nutshell a little bit what we're working on at the moment. And then a little bit further down the line, we're gonna have like register your dApp name, so secure your name, then custom tokens, and lastly the activation of sidechain withdrawal and deposit. And then eventually after that, when the sidechains are in function, a decentralized exchange where we can swap sidechain tokens for main chain tokens and sidechains for sidechains, hopefully, because not all those projects have the funding to fly to Asia like we did with the Asia tour, Max and myself, to get ourselves listed on Bitflyer, for example, in Japan, which was a big win. And we create liquidity and also demand for the Lisk token in that regard. So a lot of things. This is like development, and we have a lot of plans as well for marketing. But it's a hobby anyway, so it's totally fine.
And that was my interviews with Amanda Gutterman and Thomas Schouten. If you've enjoyed the podcast, you can find previous episodes at gregariousmember.com/podcast, support the show at gregariousmember.com/support, and find us on Facebook at facebook.com/gregariousmember. You can find me at Christianch on Twitter or christianchiller.com. Thanks for listening, and talk to you next time.